So what game have you recently tried that I didn't end up liking? We'll answer this and a few other questions in this month's Sabre Q&A Q. Alright, so this month, it's almost like a relaunch of the Q&A series because it's been so many months since the last one. And I've got a few more different subscribers, hopefully a lot more viewers, and hopefully just being out there again, get some people chiming in. So with that, let's kind of dig into a few questions I've got. First one didn't come in from my last video, quick Q&A video, but it did come in from another channel, Idic Beers 40K, asking about which one paintbrush size do I use for painting my army. And yeah, I was really looking at it, and if I had to narrow it down to only using one, it'd be a size 0. But I really paint with two sizes, 1 and 0. 1 generally does my base coating, and 0 does all the detail work. Now, what I've noticed is that some of the different brands of brushes, their sizing is a little varied. So a 0 in one brush company might not be a 0 in another, which I find surprising. I just would think it'd be the same. But if you think about it, as far as the brush design, for me, I got to have 2 brushes. Can't just do one, because I need a base coating brush, something that I can quickly go over the whole model with. I don't like to use an airbrush for that. I know a lot of people do, but for me, I like to do simple brush paint overspray. Overspray. That's really good. Now, brush application of the whole base coat over the whole model, and that would be using kind of a typical round brush. And again, size 1 would be ideal. It holds a lot of paint and easily flows on the model. Gets good coverage really quickly. And because it's round, it flares and really spreads the paint over curved surfaces and can get down to the details. But to finish out any models, I have to have a detail brush, and most of them are size 0, and they've got a real nice fine point. Now these are generally can draw a line about 1/16 of an inch wide, maybe a millimeter or so, just some in that size range. The harder you can apply, the wider that can be. So I can do most webbing and straps and belts with that, and I can put edge highlighting on surfaces. So I have to have a 1 and a 0, a round 1 and a basically a detailed 0 size brush. So that's the way I do my painting, or 2 brushes I do. Okay, so the first question from my last Q&A video, way back in April, was also from Idic Beer, asking, what is the best brush I've ever used? And this is kind of an interesting question because I've been doing painting for a few decades. But it's interesting, I don't usually worry about the brand of paintbrush. Now, I've actually found, quality varies, just like with any product. You may find a good company that will have a great run of brushes, and then later they won't be, or vice versa. So to me, it's really not about the company. There is no one best brush. I do remember, though, the best one I've ever used happened to last me for 5 or 6 years before I had to replace it, and it was another small brush. I do not remember the brand, unfortunately, because again, brand really doesn't matter, but it was the style of brush. It essentially was a flat brush with kind of a rounded front edge, and it was about the size of a number 1 round. So it was you could apply, depending on how I painted, I could use the edge to paint a nice detailed line, or I could use the flat side and paint a broader area. So I was actually able to use it for multiple parts of the model. I still couldn't do the really fine lines in the smaller spaces because the brush was too wide, but that lasted me for several years and was very easy to use and take care of. It just, like everything, wore out after time. So I don't really have a best brush ever, so this is just kind of the way I kind of roll. So I hope that answers your question. I hope it's satisfactory to you. Feel free to, you know, ask follow-up questions for that in case there's something specific you were looking for I didn't quite address. All right, now the final question for this month that was posed to me is from DM Dave. Now, DM, this is an interesting question. He has asked, my question for this month: what is the last game you played, gave it your all, and just didn't like, and why didn't you like it? You know, rules setting, or maybe who you played against, whatever. So, Dave, sorry you're not necessarily going to like this answer, but I gotta say, it's Age of Sigmar. When that came out, I was initially disappointed because I was looking forward to getting into Warhammer, to do the nice, you know, blocks of infantry and maneuvering them just like they did in the ancient battlefield. And of course, when they came out with Age of Sigmar, that all went away. But I figured, okay, let's get away from that. I still like the idea of the fantasy combat, Lord of the Rings, and all this. So let's give it a shot. And we had at the shop, we did I don't know if it was necessarily a campaign, but it was a multi-week kind of thing where I had my wood elves at the time that I was kind of turning into my Dark Eldar for Exodites, and I used those. Now, I enjoyed the setting still. I enjoyed the terrain. I still enjoy the meta. Again, no, it's not called the meta. The aesthetics of that game, just in general. Not too keen on some of the newer models, like the Sigmarites and all that, but you know, I like the fact that those models that you had in your inventory you could still use. Well, the problem was two things conspired against the game for me. One is the lore. Basically, was in my words I would usually be thrown out the window. I don't like the idea of these, I guess they've been called realm bubbles or whatever. I like the idea of this landscape, this world that has all these different factions vying for territory on it, instead of these interdimensional kind of things. I guess I'm old school that way. Campaigns, you know, when I was running D&D or playing D&D, campaigns were set in these large worlds, and depending where you went, you had those different factions you had to deal with, and that's what I liked. And having Bretonnians, and having, you know, normal humans, and having lizard men, and having orcs and goblins, having the ogres, that was kind of cool, because you get there by traveling, and that just really played well with my head. Now, what I didn't really like was the fact that they got rid of essentially the Bretonnians, which is one of the factions I was interested in doing. And I can understand why they did it from a business perspective, but again, from the lore and from the aesthetic, I didn't like it. Unfortunately, the last reason was actually the game mechanics. So one of the reasons I'm not too keen on 40K as much. At least the lore has stayed the same, so I can still enjoy the lore, even though the rule set I don't particularly care for as much in this edition. But I guess they dumbed it down too much. I was really looking forward to moving blocks of infantry, blocks of cavalry, just like they did in, quote, the old days. And there are still game systems that do that, more the historical ones. It all seemed to be all about mobs and just mobbing your opponent. And one of the mechanics I liked about 8th edition, or whatever it was, I think it was 8th edition, was the infantry, the weapons mattered. So you had your front rank could have swords, the guys behind them could have spears, and both ranks could engage, or of course multiple spear ranks. Here it's just, can you squeeze the model in close enough to get an attack off? Yeah, I know the spears have a slightly longer range if they're written that way in the rules, but to me the idea of flanking and getting an advantage by hitting a block of infantry from the flank versus the front, having models removed from the front and where the actual damage is being inflicted, all that just made sense, and it added to the flavor. None of that's there in Age of Sigmar. So I guess the reason it boils down to I was looking for something a little more, not realistic, but a little more real in feeling than what Age of Sigmar turned out to be. So I guess it's a fun beer and pretzels game. I'll put it that way, because it's not something I'm going to ever take seriously, I think. I like to play it occasionally, just because, again, it's about the friends. So to that aspect, I would like to do it, but I'm not going to be collecting the books, or I'll just use the old battle scrolls, or whatever they call them, and just use whatever models I currently have, just to have fun. And I'll play other games that I enjoy, like Frostgrave, and I'd love to do Mordheim again. I hope they resubmit or restart Mordheim, but I like Kill Team now. Well, anyway, we'll see. So that's kind of where it sits. So one game I tried really hard, and really I gave it a good fair shot, and I really did not like it. It didn't have the flavor, and didn't engross me like the other game systems do. So. Alright, so anybody else have any questions? Please feel free to put those down in the comments. Now, before we sign off, I've got a question for all of you. 2019 is right around the corner. What goals do you have for your hobby? Small, large, doesn't matter. What is it in 2019 you want to try to accomplish in your gaming hobby? Alright, so share, like, subscribe. See you guys in the next video, and again, Happy New Year.